Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to my channel, and today in this video we are going to introduce the new entity which is one of the key things in this entire application, which is the time entry. So the idea here is that the application will allow users to add time entries, which is basically nothing but the time that I have spent working on a ticket, or what we call here is an issue. Let's say I am working on an issue which is literally time spent adding the functionality of time spent. And if I have spent about 30 minutes, that's what I would like to add into the system. And every time entry will be linked to an issue so that the issue can collate the entire time spent. Then we will be able to see how that translates into a project level and then client level. Okay. So let's get started with the bare minimum, which is first of all, we will add the model, the factory, the migration, the policies, and even the controller so that we have the scaffold in place. So let's go to PHP Storm, and first, using the Laravel IDEA plugin, we will create our model and the supporting files. My model name will be time entry, and I already have the migration. So what I will do is not create the entire thing over here, but rather I will just have the description and I will hit OK to generate the file because I already have these files. So I will just pre-populate based on the previous code and I will explain you what is happening. Yes, I would like to generate. And here we have our entire stuff which got generated. So the first thing obviously is the migration. So here we have 4 columns which are foreign IDs. I forgot to add them as imports because I copy pasted it. I'll just add them quickly. Yeah. So the first thing is we have a foreign ID reference to the user ID, the client ID, because every time entry will be done by a user. It should be for the client, for a project, and for an issue. Now, although these things, at least the client and the project are directly not required, because if I have an issue, the issue does have a project ID, and from the project ID, I can get the client ID, but there will be too many joins, and most of the time I will not need that. So it is fine to repeat this data for easy access. I'm just storing the ID, so I know that is not going to change. The max what can happen is a client can get disabled or a project can get disabled if it is not active, which doesn't really matter. So I have done this. Then we have our description, unsigned integer time. That's what we want. It will be in minutes. And later on, we will have some formatters which will allow us to convert the minutes into hours. A backdate is important for me because I have been using one application which again I had developed in-house for my company, and it was important for us to know how many entries were backdated entries, because from time to time we can generate reports and at some point maybe those reports will not match with the new ones because some time entries were added. So just to verify, we keep this field. And also what happens is if someone doesn't want backdate entries and they want to go through a process, this column will help. Then I don't have my typical timestamps because a created at and an updated at doesn't make sense from this table's perspective. So I have changed them. I have a started at because in a time entry, if it's a real-time tracker, there will be a start date. So let's start time. So let's just say I clicked on a button and the clock starts. So I'm tracking as if this is an application which is constantly running and the timer is on. And at some point I stop it. So we will have 2 ways. One is I can do it manually. I just say that, okay, on issue number 1, like this, right? I spend 30 minutes. That is one way of doing it. Or the other way is when I start my work, I just click on start and the counter starts to tick. And when I stop, we just get the started at, ended at, and we calculate the time and store it in the time. Okay. So this is my way of doing thing. So that's our migration. In the model, we will have to add certain fields. So I'll just add that as well. I'll just generate the idea files as well. Okay. And then a quick tour of our factory. We will need to change certain things. All right. So I have, again, based on our migration, we have our user ID, client ID, project ID. I can see I missed the issue ID. And then I have my description, the time, and started at. Okay, so this is the bare minimum that I will need. So I'll just close my migration, my model, the factory, and the last one here is the policy, which is going to be straightforward. I can right now keep things simple and say every user who is an authenticated user will have access. Later on, we can look at deeper policies. So as you can see, I have updated the policy. I have auth check on literally all the functions. And yeah, that's about it. So now I went ahead and created the model, but now we need to look at the tests. And what I will do is create my first test, which is to test the model entity. So I'll come over here, add a test. And then the first test that I would like to add is that the time entry belongs to a user. We have a few more relations as well. So why don't we add them as well so that it becomes a bit faster. I have a time entry that should belong to a client. I should have a time entry which belongs to a project. And the last one, it should belong to an issue. So then, what are we looking at? If we create a time entry, for user factory, and I do create, and then I expect time entry user. It's not picking up. Okay, yeah, because I haven't defined the relation. So I'm expecting that time entry has a relation called user, and it needs to be an instance of the user class. Sorry. So how do we do that? The first thing is I'll go over here, do user, and I'll have a return belongs to user relationship, and I'll add the return type. Okay, and with this, ideally the test should pass. Okay, I know why this is happening. I need to set the timestamps to false, otherwise it will complain. And yes, we have a passing test for that. Now, because we have this relation, why don't we have the opposite relation as well, which is a user has many time entry. Okay, so this is kind of done. And because we have made this change, ideally, we should also add this test to the user model. So let me open up model user. Oh, that's interesting. I don't have that test, so I'll just create that model user. It will be user has many time entries. So now I do have some missing tests for my user model. I'll just add that later. In here, I have that a user factory has time entry. Let's say that I want a count of 3, not 43. And we need to define the relation. So I'll say it is time entries. Okay. And then I'll do create. So it can go over here. And then obviously the expectation is time entries, each of them are an instance of the time entry class. And we are doing an each over here because we have 3 counts. So run that and we have a green. Okay, this is done. The model user also has been created. The user model is, the relation is defined. Now let's move on to client. Similar to what we have done in the first test, I'll have a time entry for client factory create. And then we will expect that the time entry client is an instance of the client model. Now, obviously, we don't have this relationship. So let's go over here. Okay, so the client is here. I know I need to do the project as well, so I'll just do that. And the issue. Okay, so all these relationships are created. I can now look at creating all of them one by one. So the client is here. Let me run this. And this is passing, obviously. Now we will do this for project as well. So we'll copy a lot of code. And we can literally say this is project factory. Project. Similarly, a time entry for issue, and then I expect the issue to be an instance of issue class. So let's run this first. This is working. This one is working as well. This one is working as well. And because we have these relations in the time entry model, we should have the opposite relations as well and the tests. So I should have a test for client model. So model client test. So client has a project and the client should have a time entry. So I'll just add quickly. Okay. This is going to be straightforward. So we just create a client. This is factory. I want. So because this is an opposite relation, so it will say that it has time entry count of 3. And then I expect the client time entries each to be an instance of time entry. So now this is obviously going to fail. We will quickly go into our client model, add the time entry. What was the relation? So in our case, client has many time entries. Okay, and come over here. This is still failing. Why would that happen? I think it's failing because I haven't mentioned that the relationship name is time entries. Yep, this is done. So the client is Client relation is taken care of. The test is taken care of. The next is project and issue. They are quite similar in nature. So again, I would say, why don't you try it out? And if you are not able to get it, I think you will anyways find it in the code base, but I would suggest you do it on your own and see if you're able to get that, because this is a very straightforward pattern that we are following. Ideally, you should be able to do that. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Let's see how many tests we have so far. PHP artisan test. We are at 88. All tests are passing. We have our basic time entry model created, and we are able to test most of our relations as well. So yeah, we are in good shape. This is what I wanted to cover in this video. If you like this video, then do click on the thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.